Oh, then it fades my screen. Okay, whatever, that's fine. Um, for those who were not able to be on the call, we are recording this using my laptop QuickTime. You'll be able to hear me, but you won't be able to hear anyone else. But I think I can hear everyone else, I hope. Here we go. If we're all good to start. All right, let's do it. Oh wait, I haven't shared my screen. That's also important. Bear with me. Share. Okay. Okay. Can the people on the call see the screen? Perfect. Okay. Here we go. So first of all, I wanted to say that I'm very excited to tell you about myself and share some of my work. And my goal with this presentation is to illustrate how my skills, experience, and personality can contribute to Lightspeed in the product design manager role. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by telling you about myself and my experience, and then I'll go over probably just one case study because we don't have that much time, and I'll do it at a high level, and then we can dig a lot deeper into specific slides that I go over during the one-on-ones that will happen on Friday. And then I'll wrap up and take any questions that you may have. And before I start, in case anyone on the call needs an audio description of what you're seeing on the screen, let me know, and I'm happy to give a little voiceover on that. And also feel free to interrupt if there's weird connection issues or my audio sounds faint or anything like that. All right, let's do it. So my name is Juan Pablo. I go by JP as well, and I bring a blend of engineering, design, and leadership skills, which gives me the ability to bridge technical and creative perspectives. I have over 8 years of experience at Deloitte in a consulting environment, 5 of which were in the UK, in London, and 4 were in Toronto most recently. And during that time, I had 3 promotions. That's the little celebration emojis. And I also had 4 different roles at the time. And in those roles, I worked on projects for clients across industries from e-commerce to logistics to insurance. You can see some of the clients below. And that exposed me to different experiences and teams and ways of working and challenges. So it was a really good foundation for growing in my career. In terms of my approach for design, I closely follow design thinking. And that means working iteratively to define the problem and then also incrementally developing a solution while validating with research and conversations with different stakeholders and tech and product to find a solution that is feasible, viable, and desirable. And also within that space, I've found that working in an agile framework is massively helpful in promoting collaboration between those different teams and reaching a solution that works for everyone. Okay. In my leadership experience, I have learned that every individual has different strengths and needs. So I tend to adjust my level of support and oversight for team members based on where they are in their journey of learning, skills, motivation. And my goals are always, as a leader, to set the team up for strong performance in the present and also think about their future growth. So moving them along this little curved arrow depending on wherever they are. Very briefly, outside of work, you might find me on the ice as part of the Toronto Gay Hockey Association, volunteering with Spectrum to organize events for the queer community, playing open mic nights, I like music, and also going on family adventures into nature with my dog Comet, doing photography, and also working with my dad on some home renovations that I've been doing for the last 5 years. So that has been an interesting journey on its own. And in general, I'm very passionate about inclusive culture and community building inside and outside of work. So naturally, I'm excited by opportunities where I can combine my breadth of professional experience and versatility with this passion for community building. All right, now on to the case studies. So the first case study I have to the left was an ambiguous and complex project, and I'm very proud of what we achieved in the short amount of time we had. And one of the main challenges that we had was that user research and user testing were not in scope. There just simply wasn't enough time. So that's how I chose my second case study, which focuses mainly on the research phase of the project. So I might not get to talk about that today, but we can talk about that in the one-on-ones on Friday if it comes up. We'll see how we do with time. All right, let's dive into it. So Cooperators was facing challenges with their outdated CMS, content management system, which was hindering their digital transformation and marketing goals. And they also, even though this was a big challenge, they saw this as an opportunity to embrace best practices and signal a new phase of their digital maturity and growth. So it was both a challenge and an opportunity. And I won't read the slide because that's a lot. So who are the Cooperators? The Cooperators are a Canadian financial services cooperative, and they offer insurance, investments, and financial advice. And so the main problem for this project was that their digital properties had been created a long time ago on a version of Sitecore content management system that was no longer supported or going to be supported. They were going to end the support 6 months after we joined. And regardless of support or no support, the version they were on had very limited capabilities for today's standards. And worst of all, on top of that, they had been using the CMS improperly since day one. Basically, what they were doing was they had the team of developers putting code directly into the content management system to create the UI, so only technical people could manage the content. So that ended up creating content processes that were a complete mess and a heap of design and development debt. And of course, then that has knock-on effects, which you'll see on this slide, like inefficiencies, high operational costs, poor user experience, so on and so on and so on. Yep. Sorry, say that again. Yeah, no, good question. So their main website, cooperators.ca, is built on that, and then they had, I think, 2 or 3 microsites that also lived in that CMS for their different cooperatives and their different businesses, and this is where their customers would come for advice. This is where they would purchase insurance products, etc., etc. So most of their digital presence was based out of this content management system. They could, or they could find an advisor to talk to in their community and then go through them to purchase products. They do now, as a result of this work. This is going to be really funny for the people who watch this recording because they can only hear my part of the conversation. Yeah, so very good questions. When we started the project, there was a lot of importance on the discovery element to understand who our stakeholders were to begin with, and what their needs were, and what the needs of their end users were. So we identified 2 user groups, 2 personas, which were our content authors, which was a team of developers called the webmasters, and the external users, which were the customers or the visitors to the site. And I mapped out, there's several teams also working on this project. So in green we had our Deloitte team. Cooperators had hired a vendor to make a design system for them, and they were still there working with them. They're called XDS. Then there was Cooperators, design teams, the webmasters who were the content managers essentially, and then we had Sitecore, which is a CMS vendor, the customers, and then the broader business stakeholders who would contribute to the content but wouldn't actually manage the content themselves. So just mapping this out was very helpful for us to plan our research and our approach and our collaboration. So I won't read all of that, but at a high level, there was different companies and different teams within those companies working together at different levels of involvement and engagement. Okay, so at the end of our discovery phase, we reached two overarching goals. The first being to migrate those digital properties, so cooperators.ca and a couple of the microsites, from that end of life Sitecore version to the latest version, Cloud 10, whatever it's called, with the desired impacts of unlocking the marketing capabilities, the content management capabilities, being able to have more integrations with other systems, and having that vendor support. And as part of that, to migrate, we needed to consolidate what we found out was 442 pages of unstructured content. Every page was different, and migrate it into a template-based UI that we were developing. And as part of that design, we needed to incorporate their design system that they had already invested in. So a lot of moving parts. We are hoping to improve the customer experience, the brand perception, the content authoring, and so on. In terms of the timeline, we had 7 weeks of discovery and 10 months of implementation. So it seems like a lot of time, but it was actually not a lot of time at all, and it was pretty stressful. But spoiler alert, we managed to do it. And then I'll tell you how we went about it. So we had that 7 weeks of discovery, which was around understanding the scope of the content, who our stakeholders were, what competition was doing in the market, what the current state was, and also how we were going to work together to come up with a solution. And then the second phase was doing those explorations, designing iteratively, enabling the migration, and finally coming up with next steps for cooperators once we left. And I have the design thinking little bubbles underneath. I'm not going to dwell too long on this one, but this was our team structure. So we had our core project team, which was mostly Deloitte Canada, which is in green, and then our engineering team was mostly Deloitte India, which is in the mustard. And then my little pod, the design pod, had a few folks from cooperators, which was really good. And then we also had access to a group of cooperators, design folk, and the design systems team, and the webmasters for questions and support. Oh, great question. Next slide. So my role as the experienced design lead, I was in charge of leading the team of designers to create the designs and to do the research. And also there was an element of planning for that work back plans, communicating to stakeholders, and also enabling the tech teams with a design engineering strategy for the migration. So there's a few elements to it. I also did a little bit of hands-on design work, which I liked, but not too much. And I'll go into details. So our research process, as I alluded, was somewhat limited by the fact that we couldn't do user testing, but this phase of the project was really about getting the CMS migrated and out the door, and the hope was to do the testing once it was live on this first iteration of whatever we came up with. That being said, I did not forego all research. I made sure that we talked a lot to stakeholders. We did some desk research to understand the current state, and we also had informal conversations with some end users, like the content authors. We talked to them a fair bit. Where are we? Okay, so some of the stuff we did, I'll go fairly quickly on this. The stakeholders and stakeholder workshops were mainly aimed on understanding how they were using the tool today and what the processes were and what was working and what was not working. So from there, we focused on the persona of the content authors or the webmasters. And through this also, this exercise was really good for bubbling up the functional requirements for a product team to capture. So that was also very helpful. This is some of the desk research we did. So we looked at what other competitors were doing, and this was more to understand the persona of the customer or the website visitor, to see, even though we can't talk to them, like, let's see what other people are doing. Focus was mainly on what were the content sections and what were some UI patterns that we're seeing that we liked and we thought were effective, and what wasn't so effective. So here is what we were working with to begin with. So for example, one of the main things that we were hoping to achieve, here you see a lot of competing calls to action in one very small space. So getting more singular intent sections, having a sense of hierarchy and priority. And then, of course, because we didn't know how many pages of content we were migrating, we decided to do a content audit with the help of cooperators to go over what was 442 pages to try to find patterns in the UI to see if we could do a direct template creation. That ended up not being possible because they had over 30 or 40 variations of pages. So we ended up narrowing that down to 6 templates, but I'll get into that in a little bit. So all of that research culminated in a problem definition and some opportunities to solve that problem. So how might we leverage the new Oak design system to capture the existing cooperator's website using reusable templates, improve the customer user experience, and enable non-technical content authors to create and edit pages in a flexible yet intuitive way in 10 months. So tall ask, but a very meaty and interesting design problem. Absolutely, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So if to reiterate the question for those not on the call, the how might we statement is quite big, and is there a priority of achieving those outcomes? So first priority was just do the migration, like get the content from CMS A to CMS B and make it fit. But also it has to look good because this is their main site, and a bad launch would be pretty detrimental to the brand. So where trade-offs happened were we didn't have the time to really do a lot of iterating and testing on the finer points on the user experience for either the customer or the content authors. So we kind of just had to take our best guess with what we had from previous experience and those informal conversations. So the finesse was what had to give at the end of the day. So achieving all of those things as like a first iteration, and then shelving the research. That's what gave. But we as a team kept track of all of the things that we wanted to test and the things that we're like, well, we're not sure. This is kind of risky. We're making a risky assumption. Once you launch it, please do this. for the sake of our beloved users. So no, it's a really good question, and it wasn't so easy to just have that right away. Like we came to that conclusion talking to different people and as we went along, like what's the priority, what's most urgent, and what can we sneak in that wasn't really in scope but we should do. Does that answer the question? Mm-hmm. 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 Correct. Another great question. Very good. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the design again, like more at a higher level. So for the design team, we focused first on designing the templates using the design system, so bringing in the design system elements and assembling it into bigger components. And then once we had that established, we shifted to enabling the migration to happen. So we've created these templates. How do we put all of this stuff into it programmatically? Because there's not enough time for somebody to manually move things over. It has to be done with an algorithm of some kind. Okay. I will spend a little bit of time on this slide because it's kind of fun. So before the design team could really do anything, we as the cross-functional team needed to decide on the technical approach for both the CMS's front end and for how the migration was going to work. And this is where my fairly rare combination of skills in engineering and design came in handy. So our engineering team, being mostly in Deloitte, India, were working to develop the approach and trying to decide, but they were doing this in isolation because, one, they thought this problem was squarely on their shoulders and that the rest of the team wasn't technically savvy enough to understand what was happening, and B, the time zone difference made it challenging for them to organically collaborate with the cooperators teams. So they weren't really talking to anyone. But by this point, through the discovery workshops and my informal research, I had built really good relationships with the design systems team, the webmasters, and the cooperators design teams. So I was familiar with how they worked and their problems and what they wanted and needed. And then on top of that, because I have worked as a front-end developer on CMS projects, I also understood what was going on with the tech. So I got to a point where I was concerned that a lot of important information was not being considered when evaluating what you're seeing on the screen, the two main decisions. So I decided to facilitate conversations between those teams so we could evaluate the options as a group and make sure that we all understood the trade-offs and the pros and cons for each. So the architect was not very pleased because he felt like I was undermining him. But at the end of the day, he came around and we came up with a strategy that we didn't even realize was an option at the beginning. And it was a very elegant solution that I was very happy with. So all those conversations were productive, and then they kind of forced us to collaborate more closely for then implementing the solution. So we ended up going with a head-on CMS, which is kind of like a Wix experience where the user can see what they're dragging and dropping into the page and previewing it before they publish it, as opposed to filling out a form that then gets injected into the UI. And the migration, we said, had to be programmatic. There was too much content. You couldn't do it by hand. It didn't make sense. So speaking of the collaboration strategy, this is the agreement we put together collectively on how we were going to work. and how we were going to use the design system components in the context of the CMS. There were some instances where we needed to just create a component in the CMS first and then later contribute it back to the design system. A little bit of design ops debt, but again, it was like an agreed and tracked assumption or risk. So that was quite interesting. I'm not going to talk too much about the slide, but essentially what I'm trying to show you here. Oh, it doesn't even let me scroll here. Sorry, you said the org? Oh, the oak system. Yeah, no. It was designed by a vendor, and so they're called XDS, and they were embedded in cooperators for, I think it was a year or 2 years under contract. So it kind of felt like they were cooperators, but they were a separate team. And they had their own backlogs and their own projects, so we had like one dedicated person from that team. But because this was the structure that we wanted to continue using even after we left, we wanted to make sure that we had those processes in place from day one so that it could scale. Great question. This is just work pack plans and planning, how we collaborated with the different functions. In theory, sometimes that fell apart. How we managed the story lifecycle. Some of the stories didn't apply to UI, so that we also highlighted that. This is the iterative journey of the homepage, which is what we started on, because the homepage just set the design language for the rest of the site, and we had a lot of comparables that I showed you earlier to reference. So first we started with just content blocks, because one of the problems that we saw was that there was a lot of competing content, and it was interesting because there was a lot of conversations around what should go first, what should go second. Anyway, we finally arrived at something, and I'm so glad that we did that because it made the UI design so much easier from there. So content blocks, then rough component structures, and from even that early on, we started thinking about the content authoring experience. So what does the hero banner let the content author do? Like, what can they pick and what is not something that they can configure? From there, it was pretty easy to start pulling in. Yeah, Eve, you have a question. Yeah. Mm. So how long I took for each phase? Let me check the timeline for reference. I think we were aiming to do 2 weeks. Yeah, a sprint for that homepage and global elements like the navigation. 2 weeks to go from from those blocks to the final design. It actually ran into 3 weeks, I think. But then the level 1 and 2 templates was much faster because we had done so much of the heavy lifting for the homepage. And then I think we had 2 other templates, and then the rest of it was the migration. So roughly 2.5 weeks for low fidelity to high fidelity. Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, we definitely thought about that. So the question was there an exercise done to prioritize the pages that we were migrating so that we could cut the content down from those 400 pages? Uh, we definitely wanted to do that. My personal preference would have been to pick the top 20 pages, migrate those, and then slowly, retroactively start chipping away at the other ones. But they didn't have the analytics. They didn't have any data to work with, and I think that the problem was that the CMS was so old that it didn't support the analytics, or nobody ever set it up. So that data didn't exist, um, and from a technical standpoint, it was decided that it was better to just do it all in one. Um, I don't know why that was easier, but we did definitely ask, and that's kind of where that is my laptop plugged in? Where that content audit piece came in, because like what are we doing? Like what are we migrating? Why so many pages? Like, do you even know what's in these pages? The answer was no. A lot of pages were like from the 90s maybe, so nobody read them anymore. But anyway, yeah. Oh my, sorry. We just didn't have enough time. We didn't have enough time, and that's the problem, because we started. Sorry, my laptop got unplugged. Um, we we started kind of trying to see what was there, and it was so massive that we said, okay, let's do a content audit. The people who know the content best, let's just scan and see what's there. And it resulted in being like, we just don't have the time to clean the content, because it also would have been much easier to be like, okay, can you put this content into some kind of structure so that when we migrate it, we know how we're mapping things. um, Also not an option. But you're right, like that would have made everything much easier. So very, very messy migration. uh, just gonna scroll, and this is our final design for the home page. Much better in my opinion than the previous one. Okay. So in terms of enabling this to happen with the CMS and trying to balance this whole concept of flexibility to be able to capture all of this content, but also not making it too complicated that a non-designer or a non-developer could still do it in an intuitive way without, creating a mess. Um, the approach that we took under my influence was a nested component approach. I won't go into the details, but here's an example of, in the homepage, you have the homepage template, which gives you some slots of components you can pick, and then those components have options within them to pick further components, etc. And this is what it looks like under the hood, some of the documentation we had. So this is a block. You can have a headline, other stuff, the CTA, that or call to action, that comes from the design system, and these are all the options the author has for that component. And the next layer, and how it should behave if they only pick 2 cards, how should they grow and expand and whatever, and then finally where they put the content. And also, to help in the documentation effort, I came up with a schematic structure. So this is how the content authoring would map out for the homepage template, and we had 2 or 3 more, I can't remember how many. So developers were very excited by this schematic diagram. They weren't expecting it from the design team. So again, happy I could do that. Through QA, as one always does in design, things came up that we weren't expecting. Sometimes things just didn't work. And this was one example in the hero banner. We had made it so that you could have the text bubble be on the left or on the right, but then quite often the image at some point in the responsive range, key pieces of the image would get covered up. So that was an interesting problem to solve. And I'll just spoil the solution. We either had the option of just changing how the component looked, or giving the content author an option to tell the browser how they wanted the image to focus. Where do they want it to crop? And that actually was a very elegant solution, because they went from being able to use 1 in 20 images to being able to use 8 out of 10. So I was very happy with how we solved that, and then also with the buttons that we imported from the design system. They worked on some background colors, but not others. Sorry, going too fast. So on this dark blue, even though it wasn't technically an accessibility violation, it didn't work. So we came up with a contextual, if the background is this color, automatically use this other variant, which we had to request from the design system team. So that involved quite a few conversations between the different teams to come up with a solution that was that made sense, not just from a UI perspective, but also from a design ops lens. Next, come on. Okay. Ooh, too many. So that was the UI design part of it. Now came the more challenging part of how are we gonna kludge all of this content into these beautiful designs that we have. To help the development team, we went back to that content audit, and using the broader patterns, we did a mini audit of components that we thought we could map to our new components. So if you see one of these things, use this or this. For the banners, on a level 2 page, use this. So we had a pretty long list of those. And the second piece of it was giving them examples of full pages that we translated. So, and back to your point, where we did know what the key pages were. So I think we had 12 that we manually translated in Figma to show the development team, using our mapping structure, this is what the end result should be. And from there, they were able to come up with something. I don't know how they did it. It was very impressive that they managed to. And then the last piece, of course, of this project was around the next generation. When we hand off to cooperators and the design system team, what could the process look like? Your webmasters who are developers can now focus on maintaining the CMS UI code in a proper repository with version control. So they're happy doing that. Who's going to do the content authoring? So you can have your UX content people do it. And the process was much simpler. I also have here some cleanup activities that were deprioritized, again, and like you asked, some of the research that still needed to be done, and then down here was around how the design system would work with the CMS codebase going forward. So those were interesting conversations to have with different stakeholders, and then presenting that to the fairly senior folks in the client team. So it was a little scary, but very rewarding. And then finally, for the outcome, I would say that we met all of the goals that we set out to do. It wasn't perfect, but we did do the migration. All 442 pages were migrated into our 6 templates. We did use the design system components. The UI looked really good. It we thought that users were going to love it. The webmasters were very excited. So I think overall it was a big success. I think Yeah, yeah. Actually, yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Did they ask us to come back for more work? Um, the project I did after this one was more of a strategy of just like digging deeper into that strategic this thing. I think it was like a 4 week thing. Uh, so fleshing that out even more, and then I also did um, a thing to setting up Hotjar and doing that analytics and figuring out where they could improve their funnel for buying insurance products online. So yeah, they were happy, so they brought us back, and I was happy to come back to something like I know this is good. I know we can work with this because we built it. Anything here that I haven't? Content structure, team communications. Um, no, that's just detail. So this is some of the feedback I got. Let me go into my notes so I can summarize it. Overall, it was very positive feedback expressing appreciation for my combination of skills and ability to handle ambiguity and complexity and the quality of the work. And then the second half is the constructive feedback, which my leaders were expressing that they wanted more visibility and involvement in my work stream. I kind of just took the work and went with it, but in their perspective, they weren't able to see what I was doing, so they wanted more visibility, which leads me to lessons learned. So despite my efforts to schedule meetings with them, they had conflicting priorities, which almost always led to cancellations of my meetings, and also my email updates were always buried in their inboxes. Um, but as a UX designer, I know that that's just the situation that they're in. That's those are their pain points. I'm not going to fight that. I'm going to try to find a solution. So I did two things, or I learned two things. One, establish the communication methods at the beginning of the project. So as my leader, how often do you want to hear from me, and in what form, what day, what time works best for you? So they have a bit of ownership on showing up to those meetings, and I have clarity about when to put things in their calendar without feeling guilty. Second thing, I still kept going with asynchronous updates, but the hack I learned was that if I record a screen share like I'm doing right now and send it on Teams or Slack or whatever, almost always they get watched. People can't resist a video. And the great thing too was that they would respond immediately saying like, hey, let's have a chat. I'm concerned about this, or like, looks great, very excited to share with the client. So just changing the medium to a richer and more engaging form worked really well. The second thing that I had feedback on was around assertiveness and being more vocal in stakeholder sessions, especially when it got to more senior folks. I just found that challenging because I have a negative association with conflict, but part of the learning here was that conflict and assertion are a powerful tool for collaboration and can lead to improved outcomes. And I think we talked about this last time. So just framing that we're working towards the same goals and that conflict can be carried out in a very productive way helped me to be less intimidated by it. And then the other thing I did was just setting the expectation at the start to say, hey, like, this is a collaborative session. Everyone can and should express their perspectives. It's an open discussion. So that I'm kind of opening the door not only for others but for myself to be able to be more assertive and voice my opinion. So those two things have helped. It's still something I work on, but I definitely felt an improvement from trying those things. Okay, and then this is just some cute screens for your reference. And then I think we're out of time for this case study, so I'm just gonna skip. If Figma lets me. Dun, 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 dun. This was more concise feedback than last time. Okay, now we get to the conclusion part. So hopefully, through that whirlwind of a presentation, you got a sense of who I am and how I work. And I just want to say that I would be delighted to contribute to Lightspeed by bringing my unique combination of skills, experience, and passion for community building to this product design manager role. So thank you for your time and attention. Oh, my pleasure. Oof, that might not be a good thing.